All right, everyone, good morning and welcome to another fantastic webinar provided by our friends at Eventcombo. We are here for the readiness question for AI agents, MCP, and automation. Before we begin, a quick housekeeping note that this session is being recorded and the replay will be shared after the event. We'd also love this to be interactive, so feel free to drop any questions in the chat throughout the session and we'll save time at the end to get to as many questions as possible. If you go ahead and if you're here in the chat, let us know your name and where you're from so we can say hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you're joining us from. So today's session is all about AI, and of course, that's the name and title on everyone's lips right now. But agents, MCP, and automation are moving so quickly, but readiness right now is not a fixed bar. So what looks ready from a leadership dashboard may feel very different from us event professionals responsible for making it work, especially under pressure. Today, we're going to look at readiness from several perspectives and ask more useful questions to simplify, is it ready or am I ready? But ready for what? And according to whom? So if you're in the chat right now, we'd love to know, what does AI readiness mean to you? And of course, we'd love to introduce our fantastic webinar panelists this morning. We do have to make one quick note that the CEO of Eventcombo, Sarushkal, may or may not be able to join us due to a last-minute emergency. We are so sad to miss his perspective, but I know that Brad and Dan will be here to be super informative and be able to give us plenty of information. With that, I'd love to welcome Brad Shimmin. Brad Shimmin is the Vice President, Practice Lead, Data Intelligence and Analytics and Infrastructure at Futurum, where he provides strategic direction and market analysis to help organizations maximize their investments in data and analytics. Currently, Brad is focused on helping companies establish an AI-first data strategy. Welcome, Brad, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Devon. Thank you for having me. Good to see all of you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing such a good data lens to us. And moving right over to our another expert, Dan Chuparkoff. Dan is a technology leader at Google, McKinsey, and Atlassian, where he led transformations for teams in every industry. Thank you. Known as the practical and understandable technology speaker, Dan's superpower is making complex things simple and useful. Dan, from an AI novice who doesn't understand technical jargon, thank you so much for coming and bringing something a little simpler and easier to digest to this webinar.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation with us today. It's going to be fun.
I am super excited as well. So, okay, if you are here, make sure you go ahead and put in the chat where you are calling in from so we can connect with you. But let's dive right in on what ready actually looks like and what ready depends on. And I'm almost going to use like air quotes for ready, because I think depending on where you are, what your organization looks like, corporate, not-for-profit, association, independent, third party, in-house, I feel like ready has so many different meanings. So stopping for a second to look like what ready looks like, Dan, I'd love to start with you thinking about in a simpler way, like what could ready mean in the most simple terms for teams and people expected to use AI tools in their everyday work?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I think ready means three things. Ready means I want to, I'm allowed to, and I know how to.
All right, let's say that I want to, I know how to.
That's the third one. And I'm allowed to is the other one, right? So I want to, I'm allowed to, I know how to. And you can pick any one of those things to start with. A lot of people pick I want to first, because if they don't yet want to, the other two things don't matter. And so, work your way through those as an organization or as a person, depending on your comfort with change, and figure out how do you start reading things that help you figure out if you even want to do this AI thing, right? And that's the place to get started.
It's such a great opening, Dan, and I appreciate that, because I think what you're really laying a foundation, and Brad, I'm going to bring you in right now, especially on the know how to and allowed to things, because I think the want to is probably there even in the smallest bit for a lot of us, because I think we're seeing everywhere that it looks like it makes things easier. And, event professionals are constantly listed as one of the 10 most stressful jobs in the world underneath like brain surgeons, firefighters, and loggers, and event professionals. So anything that can take a little bit of stress away or make our lives easier, definitely something we probably want, but know how to and allowed to are probably some of our biggest stopping points. And I would even add, based on our earlier discussion, having the time to know if that's allowed. But Brad, I'd love to bring you in here because I think this is where the company standpoint is really going to factor into what Dan has opened with. Like from an enterprise perspective, what does readiness depend on in our organizations? Are we underestimating something? Is there a stoppage that you're seeing from your work in the know how to and allowed to part, so we can feel like we can even get this ball rolling and then move forward?
Yeah, I think that the three rules that Dan spelled out for us there apply both to the person and the organization equally. Because if the company doesn't want to, and it doesn't know how to, and it's not allowed to, it doesn't matter what you, the individual worker, wants to do, it ain't happening. And on top of that, I think that, yes, the how to and allowed to are definitely stumbling blocks, but I think that people don't give that I want to enough credit, because just as you mentioned, Devon, with time, if I don't know what I want to do, like, if I'm looking at a mandate from the company that says, go ahead and use Claude Cowork and 10x yourself, where on earth do you start with that? You need to kind of know what you want to do. Do I want to use this to answer all my emails? Do I want to use this to look at my calendar for the week and suggest blocks where I can get something done? You need to understand what objectives you might have with AI, and to understand then what can I actually do with it before you move on.
I love that take on that, Brad, because, when we said like, I want to, I think that first readiness is I want to, but I have no idea what that means. And we're looking at things like automations and readiness agents, MCPs, and it's like, I don't know what that means. No, for our friends who also don't know what that means, we are going to get there. I promise. We're going to make sure that we lay this out. But this idea that I see that I want to, I feel I want to, and I feel like it will make something easier, but I don't even know where to start to look at automating anything. And if it's so confusing, do I even have the time, or do I want to spend the time to figure out if I'm ready to know what that is? So I think there's a lot of chicken and egg here in terms of getting that preparation. And it also feels like readiness depends heavily on responsibilities. So if I'm a more junior person, maybe, just helping me keep an eye on my calendar or helping me like get my emails prepped for the day might be different than someone higher up who's maybe a data cruncher and has to deal with massive spreadsheets or numbers, budgeting, accounting. So I think that sort of segues us into allowed to. Dan, thank you for giving us this lovely thing to look at, and allowed to because of safe and value. And I think that's something, especially looking at automations and things that have access to data, people using technology are asking whether it's reliable, understandable, useful, and the pressure is on. So do we even want to go there? Just a quick question for our friends in the chat. Who currently stands or owns AI readiness or allowance in your organization? Are you allowed to do it? Is this a mandate from HR? You're allowed to, you can use this, but not that. Your company has an internal. I'm sure we'd all love to know who has what, and then we can share that in the chat. But starting with this idea of that readiness depends on a lot. Brad, from your perspective, working internally in teams, who do you think is mostly owning AI readiness, but what do you think their biggest roadblock is to saying yay or nay?
Yeah, there's always a corporate sponsor. And if you don't have somebody that's in a position where they can actually say, let's go spend money, you're going to go nowhere. So it starts with that. You need to have sponsorship. But interestingly, I think that even if that's in place, and even if you have IT behind them saying, okay, we understand, we're going to implement, and they set it up so that you're secured and performant, et cetera, it still is going to come down to the participation. And I remember, because I'm old, social networks, when they came out for the enterprise. Okay. I know Dan knows this. This is his history. It was like we were measuring the utilization, like how much you use these things, and understanding what your ROI was like nigh on impossible. So in this current age that we're in for agentic automation, what I think counts more than having the sponsorship and more than having the underlying tech is having people in the teams that you're working in as those, next level adoptees that are willing to mentor or willing to support or even build out solutions. Our company, we were talking about this before we jumped on the webinar, but every company is different. Ours is very AI forward, and we have a great IT team, but our analysts are also very technical. And so they all said, hey, we'd like to be responsible for building out our own tool chains for how we want to use AI. And so we were given the freedom to actually design what we wanted to do and requisition the tools that we needed to get that done. If you didn't have people that were willing to put in that kind of effort on your team, it's always going to be like the social networks where it's like, oh, Do I really have to do this?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the want to. It's like, I don't know that we want to. And if we don't want to, then there's going to be no buy-in. It doesn't matter what it costs. It doesn't matter, what that is. If there's no want to. And I feel like every time there's like a new technology that we're like, there's always that someone's like they want it to be fully ready and tested by other people. And I think for this one, and we had talked about this a little bit earlier, is that like 93% of people said they want to do it, but only 6% are really putting this into practice. We had talked about for the speed and adoption, those 6.5% are going to have the market share. They're the ones that are going to get your clients. They're the ones that are going to get the business.
That's right.
If they're the ones who are taking the time to adopt and move in that direction. But I want to pause and move back because we're talking about AI agents and getting ready. Let's make sure we understand what we're getting ready for. So Dan, I'm going to tap into your superpower of explaining this to us like I need you to draw it in crayon. I need the Sesame Street hip hop song version of this. But we're talking about agents and MCPs and readiness and automations. And while some of us may have an idea of what that could be, or even maybe playing a little bit of that on our own, let's really talk about what this could mean. So in your terms, could you explain to us sort of the differences between an AI agent, automation, and MCPs so we can kind of have a great idea of what we're talking about and could be ready for?
Yeah, certainly. And certainly those three things, agents and automation and MCPs, all sort of overlap. There's a Venn diagram, right? But okay. First, before I get there, I want to talk about before agents. What we had was a single AI assistant. And you could have a conversation back and forth, but that's it, right? You could have a conversation about writing a post for LinkedIn, but then it was still your responsibility to copy the draft post and go over to LinkedIn and put it there because your chat assistant can't actually go anywhere. Right. And so
they're the helper, but you're the go person. You're the push and the go. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so what agents allowed us to do is jump out of the chat and go over to LinkedIn and put some information in a post and click the submit button. Or go over to Expedia and find the flight you want and click the button that says buy a seat on this plane, right? That unlocked a whole new level of AI access for people because now it can virtually go anywhere, anything that has a website, or even you might not even need websites anymore because behind the website, there's an API, not to introduce another acronym, but right, behind the website, there's the code that makes that website work. And your AI agents can just go right to that code and you won't even need the travel booking website anymore. You'll just go to the flight list and pick the one you want and then get a seat. That's how agents, and that's how we got from AI assistants to an agent to automation, because now you can keep doing things over and over and over again in a loop, right? And that's right. That's where you start to get real value.
If I was going to break this down before I could, let's say, have my chat GPT. My name is Emery. We came up with a name because it was easier than Dear Chat GPT. Like, I need help writing this email, and that could help me draft it like an assistant, but I would still have to take the email, open my email up, draft the email, and press send or do any attachments. So now my agent can be in my email, like sort of an advanced assistant who can do this without me having to be in my email, to open my email up, read them, draft replies, ask if I want to send them. All I have to say is go, and it will take the replies and send them without me having to do any of that. And now an automation can do that every single day, open my email, check them, draft replies, put the things in my calendar, hold the calendar, say yes to things that need yes or no answers. So there's this sort of almost like this other person, like a real human assistant who's doing all this behind the scenes, and I can just focus completely somewhere else. Did I get that in crayon right, guys?
Yeah, I think so. And to add a tiny bit more clarity that might explain what MCP means, right, is your AI assistant, Emery, doesn't go in your email, but instead your AI assistant, Emery, has an assistant, which is an MCP. And that assistant can go into your email on Emery's behalf and do stuff there. And so you can have an MCP for your email, and an MCP for your Google Flights, and an MCP for your LinkedIn. And all those things have the ability to go into that specific tool and do stuff there.
Wow.
Can I add something there, guys? Because it's such a nice explanation of what this is. And there's so much hype and complexity that we can introduce with this stuff. And really, it's just so simple. All we're talking about are three things. There is the model, so like Gemini or Claude. There is the tools. And this is what Dan's talking about with MCP servers. Then you have what's called a loop. And all a loop is a loop. So like if you've ever done like intro to programming or basic or any of language, take your pick, they all have this concept of do this until that is met.
Okay.
Whatever that is. And all they're doing, what gives them autonomy is the ability to loop through my instructions. So I'm talking to Emery, the chatbot, and I'm saying, I want you to parse this Excel spreadsheet and do some calculations and give me a nice output. And it might, in its task say, how do I do that? Oh, I have a web browser that I can use. Or, oh, I have a Python library that can read that spreadsheet. Those are the tools. It then loops over that goal, not task, but goal of building out the output and decides what tools it needs, how to use the tools, and then comes back with this happy answer that's always right, Dan?
Well,
that was sarcasm, if anybody
it was
I love that. And I think you guys bring up a great point right there. So, and thank you both so much for sort of breaking this down, because I think knowing where we can add a little bit more here, a little bit more there, and looking where we want to add, I want to go from my assistant to an agent. I want to up it a little bit, or I might be ready to go from an agent to some automation. I know a lot of independents, like I need something that's going to help with my calendar, or like I want to wake up in the morning and say, you had 10 emails overnight, you prioritize them. These are drafts based on what we know that you've trained us in your voice. Is this draft good? I still have the final say. And now I think that's where, Dan, to go back to the beginning of readiness and looking at all of these, is I want to be able to do that. I think I know how to, but the alloweds to, maybe where some of this is stopping is, where do I still come in having oversight if I can automate, Brad, to your point, all this stuff that can happen, where, knowing that things aren't always 100% correct, where do I still factor in to make sure that if there is fear around things happening, kind of the train is running away with itself, where do I still get to come in these automations to ensure accuracy, to ensure whether it's data privacy, accuracy, the right tone of voice, the right, like just anything that's like, I need to stop and make sure that like there is still some sort of conductor running the train.
My take on that is, I don't let my AI agents do anything without an approval check.
Okay.
Now, sometimes that approval check is manual. I look at it, it takes all my emails from yesterday and writes 10 drafts. And then they're sitting there waiting for me to approve. And then they go out. But sometimes I notice something that was wrong and I fix it. And then I add that to the agent's definition of what good looks like. So my approval then it automatically looks for that again next time, right? So every time I find something that my agents did incorrectly for me, I add that to my governance file, right? I just have a big text document called "Don't do these things again," and and then every time, and every time it does some things for me, booking a flight or responding to an email, it looks at that "Don't do it" file first. Right. But then I still always have a manual review for myself for things that really matter.
And I think that's one of the things that, for a lot of us, when we see these more and more technology, like the robots and the, my Roomba, like, you kids who are ordering necklaces and bicycles off of like, Alexas, and they had to put a fail safe in there. And I'm wondering, if that's the biggest fear, but we're looking at more industry adoption. And, Brad, that's where I want to bring you back in, is like, where were these things surprisingly good, but where, or maybe a use case where it's surprisingly good and can kind of get over some of that fear because it is producing something that still has a lot of value. So can you maybe share a use case or something that you've worked on that can help us understand that it's still valuable, even if, or maybe our fears are unfounded in some ways?
Our fears are very founded, but it's something that we shouldn't actually fear, because it's the irony of all of this is that the thing that makes generative AI models, the models behind agentic processes, are probabilistic systems, and they're goal-oriented, not task-oriented. And for those two reasons, every time you run something through them, even if you have that exact same automation every day, it might be different tomorrow, depending on many, many factors. And so you have to really kind of stop thinking about them as deterministic systems like we used to. Like we used to think software, think about it very differently. It was like, every time I run this application, it's going to work the exact same way. Well, agentic systems don't. And that's what makes them special. And that's what makes MCP servers, just the whole concept of MCP so important, because what it does is it enables for that sort of free form, I want to get to the goal. I don't care how you get to the goal. And that's so when I say go through my email and find all the tasks or responses that I need to make today and compile a list of what I need to do or start the messages or whatever and let me approve them, maybe today is a different scenario because you're working on a different project. And how would the agent know about that? Well, it might know if you have a set of skills that have a list of MCP servers or via extensions or whatever that you've built into your personal agentic harness, whatever that is, Claude, Coworker, just Claude, whatever. Right. And what it can do is say, hey, dear MCP, I see that Brad's working on project X. I know that we have a database that we've set aside for this project. How do I access it? Can I get in there? What's in that database? And that's what MCP gives the model, gives the agent, is that sort of yellow pages of, oh, you can get this data in this way. Go get it. That's the brilliance of it. And that's what really enables that sort of flexibility that I think we really should embrace, not run away from.
I love that because, we're still talking about the human aspect here, right? We're still talking about we're all doing things so specifically. And I think especially in our industry, when we have multiple projects running at the same time, we have multiple usages and I need multiple ways for it to come out. If the software is just binary, it does this and uploads that, and that's all it can do. Having something that basically is trainable, can think a little, even if that's maybe slightly scary to think, it can think, but it can think in a way that's I can understand that there might be variables. I can even stop and ask, is this for A project, B project, or C project? Because I know that will depend on how I answer, and it starts to be trainable that way. I think you're right that it does make it special, but it still requires us to be ready to train it, to look at and have ourselves start asking the right questions. Where I think is, where we were going to go next is talking about the readiness for us before we automate. Now that we know that it's special, what it can do, and understanding our readiness, we still need to put two things together before we just start pressing go on every agent and MCP and creating all these automations and maybe not knowing how to have even basic readiness. I also want to thank everyone for putting questions in the chat. There are some really great ones coming in. I'm actually going to stop for 1 second because there was a great question from William that Dan, you kind of answered, but what is the smallest team size where this is worth setting up? What's a task everyone assumes is automated by now, but your team is still doing by hand? So Dan, you said team of one. So I'm a team of one, so I appreciate that. But where is it worth setting up? And I think a team of one might even be the most worth it. We could probably argue is setting up automations. But, for both of you right now, what's a task everyone assumes is automated by now, but a team could still be doing by hand?
Well, I'll jump in if you don't mind, Dan.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The busy work, if most of us here they're on this webinar, and us included, are people working, in an industry that is dominated by technology. And with that comes the added benefit of everything can be documented, everything can be, turned into some sort of, flow of information, and managing that flow is horrible most of the time. Just, all the things that we're asked to do on a daily basis, to say, everything from just clocking in the morning, let's say, or everything and all the way to generating a weekly report of whatever we're tasked to do for our jobs. All of that can be automated if approached correctly. And as you rightfully said, Devon, it all starts with one. You think about what you need to do. Think about how AI might help you with that. And then move on to the other two questions that Dan laid out for us. And because of that, if I can think about any successful use cases I've seen in my travels, it's all sort of hedged around how I, on my desktop, because we all work on a laptop or a desktop or a both, or your phone, for crying out loud. We all have tasks that we do on those things,
Absolutely.
All of those can be what I would call augmented, not always automated, but augmented by AI.
What a great differentiation. Yeah.
Any little thing, whether it's just remember spam, which when I say remember spam is with us perennially. But that idea is AI, the ability to sort of look at your inbox and say, this might be suspicious. And I know it's suspicious because the last 10 times I saw it, it was suspicious. You can apply that to any task that you and I have in our daily life in working on our machines, and AI can touch it, whether it's using, an MCP server to see what's on your disk. You have databases of things, you have spreadsheets of things, whether it's just tools like, I'm so sorry for saying this, but like grep, sed, awk. If anyone knows what those are, raise your hand, because they're wonderful inventions. that
I'm sitting here, I'm like, I think you just spoke in a different language or speaking tongues now, and I have no idea what happened.
They were like built back when Unix was a thing and mainframes were the thing, and just built to like manage files and like look for things on your desktop. And AI is really good at using those. So instead of me opening up a search box and going, what was the name of that file that I made last week and who was it about? You could just say, open your mic and say, hey, Emerald, was it Emirate?
Emery, yeah.
Emery, sorry. Emery, I was working on this project last week. Can you find the files that I need to get back into it today? And using all those tools and its magic loop, the model can go get them for you. That's what we're talking about.
I really want to go back to something you said, because I think this is a really great way to maybe start reducing the fear a little bit, is about augmenting versus automating. And I think when we're looking at the fear, and what's everyone's number one fear, is that AI is going to take my job, right? It's like AI is not here to take your job. But I think when we think about, and we are having a fun chat about what if you could automate any one task that you do repetitively in your workflow every day, like what would it be? June, I loved your answer. Calendar scheduling back and forth, that's soul crushing. Like, I'd love to just say, find a time. Just go find a time. Like, this is where I like my time. This is where I block my time. Like, just let's not have that back and forth. Go find me a time. But, thinking about, I don't want to spend so much time going back and forth in emails saying, are you here? Are you there? Are you there? It's like, hey, like your agent talked to my agent. She's free. You're free. Great. Like, it's done. It just saves so much repetitive motion of going through things like that. And that saves me time. So I'm a party of one, run my own business. I'm, my own person. I would rather work on preparing for webinars and looking at questions and scheduling this. I'd rather work on designing for my clients or looking at script building, because that's where, one, my passion is, but two, that's the art that I get paid for. Like, taking all this time to figure out who's on email's calendar at what point and who's sending the Zoom link. It's like, I don't want to do that. That's the soul crushing part. And it takes time away from, the work that's valuable. So this idea that we can use and start to prepare ourselves in readiness for augmenting our work, I think maybe reduces the fear that we're replacing ourselves versus I'm replacing the need to have to do all of this repetitive stuff so that I can really be focused on the core, the crown jewel of what I do. I don't know if that's oversimplifying it, but I like that you kind of distinctly, because I think it took away some fear for me that I'm not replacing anything that I do. I'm just augmenting the need for me to have to do all of it. Kind of going back to Will's point about the team of one. We probably more than anyone need to build some of this. But kind of going back to, and there's so many questions in the chat, so I will make sure that we get back to those. But I want to talk about teams really getting ready to say, okay, let's say we finally get someone to say, you're allowed to do it. Where do we start? And what is the foundation? Especially because we're all working at a mile a minute and I don't have time to make another cup of coffee, let alone sit here and learn MCPs and build automations and know which tool to use and which one my company is allowed to use. And are we buying one and how much it costs? And like, it just seems like there's no time to be ready, even if being ready will save me a lot of time. So I was wondering if you could both talk to, like, where's the value in finding the time and what is one of the first steps to be ready or questions to ask? And I believe June asked that in the chat as well. It's like, what's our first 5 questions? Like, where is the start? Like, who do we interview? And Dan, I want to start with you on this one, because I think from like a real simple state, like, what are the simple questions we can ask, whether it's internally or if we're looking to have a Brad come in and help our team build this? Like, where are the simple questions to start to feel like we can build a strong foundation, even if there's variables that come after?
Yeah, I think the place that I like to start is asking the question, what do I wish I could do that I can't do right now for my customers?
Right. What is I wish I could do that I can't do for my customers?
Right. Because one of the challenges people have with AI adoption is they focus on efficiency. They try to make a thing that they're already doing continue to keep being done, but they want it to take less time. And the problem is when you're trying a brand new thing, it's not quicker. It takes longer. You don't know what mistakes you're making. You have to double check everything you touch. You make some mistakes. You have to go back and do it over. When you start using AI, it's not making you quicker. And that makes people frustrated. But instead, you could say, like, what's one thing that my event attendees always ask me for, but I don't have enough time to do it. And give AI that project. Now you have no baseline like for comparison. It's being compared to not being done at all. So even if it's only 20% good, it's still probably better. So focus on trying to build more value and not just trying to create the same value with less resources, because that's just commoditization. You don't want that anyway, because that's going to start shrinking your team. You don't grow by shrinking your team.
What a great distinction. Because I think maybe in the I want to, and we talked about this before, it's like, I don't know what I want to do. And so maybe that builds the frustration of I want to make things faster, but it takes longer to make it faster at first versus these are here to solve problems and wish lists. I know a lot of the clients that I work with, it's all about data. It's like, I wish I knew if that was successful. I wish I could measure what that did. I wish I had a way to X, Y, Z. And it's usually about gaining knowledge of some kind and being able to process data. And this CRM tool doesn't talk to that registration tool, doesn't talk to that, and all of these things have to be manually inputted, et cetera, and not having the time versus I wish I just knew or could know right now if something had happened or if this was valuable. So I love, Dan, that you allowed us to be like, let's find something that we can compare to it not being done at all, or you wish you had, which then could add value and give you more time on the back end. So thank you for simplifying that. Brad, to move on to you, thinking about augmenting these things, adding a little value, 20% more value versus slowing everything down to have trial and error time. Where do we start with you? Like, what is your favorite first question? What is a great preparedness team who's ready to go and like run with you versus one that's just like maybe you're hitting your head against that brick wall? Can you like draw those two parallels so we know if we want to be on the good team, let's say, though it's ready, like what does that look like and how do we ask and what do we have prepared for you when you would come in and try to help us?
The blue team and the red team for cybersecurity. You've got to have those that are fighting against you to help you and those that are fighting for you to move you forward. And so you I think you need to look at it with Dan's viewpoint as equal to, if not more important than the traditional viewpoint, which he rightfully mentions, which is we always focus on lowering costs and speeding time to value. And that's always a race to commoditization. It's tough because, AI doesn't think about your job at all. It's not here for your job. It's just trying to disambiguate whatever question you give it and get to the solution. And if that question is, how do I help my customers? Here's, you and I, dear Emery, have been working together for the last 2 months in Claude Cowork, let's say. You know a lot about me. You've seen all my files. You've read my emails. What can I do to help? And what I find most fascinating about AI right now is that open-ended question. It's really the case that when we were thinking about AI and agentic processes just a year or so ago, it was like, Dan, you were describing with the chat response, they were like a knowledge worker and now they're taking action. But that action is not like just solve this problem that already exists. The action can simply be, hey, look at all the work we've been doing, Emery, together. How can I make my life better? How can I make my customers' lives better? These tools are, and I've seen this happen with the models that are behind them. They're all being built now in terms of how the companies like Google and Anthropic and OpenAI are actually training these models. They're all being trained to do what's called a long horizon task, something that might have many, 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 many steps to it and might involve many, many sub-agents themselves all working different steps, different tasks, all independently to basically do something that's everything from figuring out how you might help your customers to finding a new protein that could be the next life-saving invention. So the art of the possible is just as important as the art of what we have now. And in both cases, it's always a bet against the future because you do have to invest in it. You're not going to just rook up on day one and say, make this more efficient or find me a new solution and have magic happen. There's always going to be an iterative process. This has to be an engagement with AI to move you and AI forward in your job. So my advice to everyone out there is simply, recognize the art of the possible, recognize where your pain points are, and try to work towards both in a very forgiving manner.
What a fantastic take, Brad. I'm sitting here like, I want to say a little shook, but it's such a fantastic way to think about like when we have trial and error as humans, like it's an iterative process. Like, do my attendees like, in the city or in the country? Do they like tier 1 cities or tier 2 cities? Do they like everything to be in the hotel ballroom or do they like everything to be outside the ballroom? Like we have to try things and we have to learn and that's okay. And why wouldn't we apply that to a new set of tools? like if I use it this way, if I use it that way, like how do I use this to maximize, whatever it is. I really think that having the patience and believing what's possible and having the space to try is almost as important. I think it's really a mindset shift. It's almost as important, this mindset of it, versus the like, do I have all the data and do I have, the people and the computers and the, all of that sort of like hardware to do it. It's almost more important to have the right mindset. So I think you both were really allowing us to do that. Now, I would be remiss if I did not get to these chat questions because it is blowing up and both of you there's a laundry list in here for you. Dan, I'm going to start with you. If the agent double books a session room or sends the wrong link to 500 people, who's on the hook for fixing it live?
Yeah. There's a couple questions that get to that problem in this chat list.
Okay.
First of all, you're responsible. That's the answer, right? If your Excel spreadsheet has a formula that messes up, you don't say Excel screwed up this thing. You are the master of your Excel spreadsheet, and that doesn't change just because you're deploying an AI thing.
It's still a human error, even if it's an AI error. It's an AI-fed human error.
The other thing that Brad sort of touched on this, and it's really important to understand, AI is probabilistically doing work. It's doing stuff that's probably true. Okay. If you need something that's for sure true, you might not want to use AI. AI software isn't always better, right? AI is great when you say like, I kind of want a picture of a frog riding a unicycle. I don't exactly know what that looks like, but can you just give me some choices? And AI is like, there's no right answer here. AI is going to get as close as it can to what you just said. If you have a list of registrants and you want to put them in your Cvent app, you want a script. You want a script that works the same time every time. You don't want a probabilistic assistant. And so don't go into this journey thinking, oh, AI software is better than if-then rules that have been QA'd by a person, because that's not always the case.
Right. There is a lot of questions about if-then rules, or there was someone, I think,
if you don't mind, Devon, I'd like to just say something about that, because Dan's totally right. Sometimes don't need AI, but what we need to bear in mind is that you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too, because that three-part I was talking about, the model, the tools, and the loop, the tools can be very deterministic and often are. When we ask an agent to do something like match names in a spreadsheet to a list that I have automated and sending out invites, it's not going to go, I think that says, Chuparkoff with an E. It's going to be, I have a regex pattern that is going to look for the occurrences of these values. And that's what gets returned to the model. So it's not either or. It's not always just deterministic or just probabilistic. It's always going to be both.
I love that. And I think what you brought up, Brad, is a really good point that, again, we all joked, and everyone in the chat has a name for one of the agents' assistants that they work with. There's a name. I wanted a gender neutral name, and I spent time in chat figuring out what that is and what it meant, and that's the one that we settled on. And it's just, for me, easier to use that because I feel like I'm talking to an assistant. But I think what we've been tricked into in these assistant first models that we're still assuming is that it can think like I think. There's an assumption that if I'm asking it to do this, so Brad, to your point, like it's going to return like values. Like it's not going to understand what you're saying because you know what you're saying. It's only going to look at values. And so where I think our shift is that we need to move away from it understanding what we mean by that and get more specific with, I'm looking at these values to match with these values to do this thing. And I think maybe in our readiness, there's two mindsets that you've asked us to shift. One is that it can augment, but doesn't have to replace. It's there to help us think forward to the art of the possible, but we also have to remember that it can only work with data points and values, and it's not actually thinking. It's only as good as what we feed it and what it has access to. So I think part of our readiness may need to be a mindset shift into what is possible to do. And some of our readiness may be some self-education on values and probabilistic, and use another word that I don't remember that sounded very smart, but those types of things that allow us to think better about its capabilities to use it to our advantage.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting to note, we all talk about hallucinations and how bad they are. And they're not a symptom of the failure of AI. It's simply a reflection of the reality that the AI doesn't have the information that it needs, or has information that's conflicting, or there's something else in the information we're feeding it that ain't right. And that's why MCP is such a critical component, because it can help to disambiguate, help to the model to get to the data that it really needs to make a decision without hallucinating.
I love it, hallucinating. Sarah made an excellent point in the chat saying AI made execution cheaper, judgment just became more valuable.
Totally. Yeah. We don't talk about data professionals anymore, by the way. We talk about AI shepherds. So the data engineers, those guys are now AI shepherds, because they know what good looks like, just like Dan said. They know what good looks like, and that's the value.
And I think maybe a partnership in going back to those people who may be able to be that bridge. Like I ask a lot, people like yourself, Dan, or even asking my chat tool. I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something that you need to know. And so can you help me find that shepherd bridge? So I'm asking you to come back with values instead of assuming that you know what I mean, because I'm clearly not communicating in the clearest language possible to get the task done. As a party of one, I go back to my agent or assistant and I ask it over and over again to help me refine what that is, to then get the thing that I need to make it useful. But again, party of one, got to use what I have. I think that's a really great way for us to understand that we do need shepherds if we are not getting what we want, that it's not that AI is hallucinating, that this is all I have to give you right now for this. So us being able to understand and analyze, okay, I think maybe we missed a step here. Do I have time to go back and figure out where that was? And how do I ask again for the frog on the unicycle in such a specific way that the output originally is closer to what I want?
Yep.
Brad, I just want to say I enjoy reading your analysis because it's practical. It doesn't feel like you're trying to sell AI. You're just trying to help people understand it.
Thank you. That's really nice, Alina. Appreciate that.
Love your energy, guys. The session's been absolutely captivating. Really enjoying the conversation. Question from Lucas. Is anyone on the panel actually running agents live during an event right now, not in a sandbox?
Oh, dear Lord, no. Yeah. I don't use them on panels like this or anything when I'm doing what we're doing right now. I don't use AI at all, but I use AI all day, every day. I run a product that's agentic. I do software development using agentic tools, and in all cases, those are sandboxed. Either they're in a virtual private machine that can't get out and break into Hugging Face. If you guys want to look this up, OpenAI accidentally hacked Hugging Face this weekend, and I also tried to make sure that in my productivity apps. So if I'm a Google Workspace user, that the permissions that I give AI are understood to me, and absolutely. I recognize, okay, it has access to this and that. If I don't know that, I'm just flying blind and hoping for the best, and I don't think that's a good approach to take with AI.
Okay, I love that. Go ahead, Dan. And then there's another question in the chat.
For me, the agents that I deploy are some in a sandbox, but most of them are actually live. I'm a speaker. I speak at conferences, and the agents that are most helpful for me are personalization of content agents. So I'm speaking to a group of people, but some of them are operations managers and some of them work in finance. I want to be able to personalize my post-event handouts for them so that they get a tweaked version of what I just said that helps them in their specific role. And then the other thing I do is at the end of my talk, I do have a QR code. You can scan that QR code, give me feedback, and that's how you get my personalized handout. But also, I'm just asking for email address and first name there. And I have an agent that's trying to find those people on LinkedIn to get more things like what role are they, what company do they work at, and stuff like that. And so I'm augmenting my CRM with probably true things, important, but it gives me a better glimpse of what my audience is.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I love, again, like Dan, like you're trying to solve a problem. It's like, I wish if I got their name and email, but I had another way to connect with them, or I could get a little bit more information, or I could. It's like, hey, could you, agent, see if you could find this? There was a question in here for one of you. I'm trying to go back up. Ali asked, does MCP actually replace the Zapier or API glue we're already using, or does it sit on top of it?
All of the above. It's not a replacement for Zapier, if then that, or N8N or LangChain or LangGraph, any of those orchestration tools is what I call them. Orchestration tools came into being to both help you to connect to things that, like Dan said, have APIs, but also to take steps and do this directed, acyclical graph kind of thing to move through a process. MCP is as I've mentioned, the yellow pages that tells those orchestration tools what they can do once they get there. The need for these orchestration tools is becoming less and less as we go forward, given the way that most agentic harnesses are evolving right now, to where, if you talk to somebody who's building on LangChain or LangGraph, they're thinking, well, it's probably going to be faster, more efficient, and more secure if I just let the agent code this. And sometimes that's like throwaway code. It's not even like code that's being maintained. These things can just build the orchestration code while they're running to get the task done. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've actually seen that. I had to dip into Claude Code to try to fix something on a website. I had sort of all of the abilities to do it, but as it came up against every problem, it was like, ooh, I can't do that just yet. Let me go find this thing. Ooh, can't do that just yet. Let me double check this. Like, ooh, can I have permission to go here so that I can find this thing and go there? And it was fascinating to watch it solve the problem, but know that it didn't have what it needed. And it just kept running task after task after task and just asking for one little thing at a time. Do I have permission to do this? Can I have access to that? Can I open this to get it done? And it was really interesting to see that, as you said, all it wanted to do was solve the problem, and it just kept working on its own until it was solved. Versus, like, if it had come up and said, I don't have this, I would have been like, well, I don't know what to do next. Like, right?
Yeah.
I realized that we were coming down to the end of our time, and it is so hard to say that. There has been a lot of questions in the chat for both of you about where can I get more information? Where do I start? What are the questions to ask? So if either of you have something you can drop in the chat or share with our listeners and on the recording, is there a link to your LinkedIn, to your websites, to an AI readiness, to data set that you like that will give us another great place to start? I'm sure we'd love that information.
I'll jump in with a quick one. One thing that I recommend for everybody is go into your favorite chat assistant and say, I want to improve my AI readiness. Give me one thing I should try every Monday. And every Monday, you'll get a new idea. Like, you don't have to go to web pages anymore. Ask your AI assistant. It knows all the things on all the web pages. That's my recommendation.
It knows all the things. I like that. Increasingly true. Yeah. And for me, the first question to always ask is, what do I want to do? And then let that be the guide for the rest of your journey.
Well, and thank you both for being our guides on this journey. Before I let you both go, I'd like one takeaway from each of you. So if you could leave us with one sentence about AI automation, readiness, MCPs, agents, and all of that, if you could just leave us with one place to maybe give us hope on how we can work alongside and augment our work with these fantastic tools, what would it be? Brad, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sure. So just recognize, and I think in the chat there's been some great conversation about this, that we are becoming AI, and that's not a surprise, because AI is a reflection of us. The data that the models are trained on is data that we've been creating for the last 30 some odd years in our books, on our forums, in our chat content, these, like this show today. Eventually our ideas are going to be reflected in AI in these models. So just recognize that it's not a fight against, it's really, if you want to understand AI, you will be understanding humanity more and more. And I think you shouldn't ever look at them as separate.
Awesome, Brad. Thank you. Dan, final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts, there will be something that you always do as people that your AI assistants will never quite do as well as you. And there are three of those things. And the first one is solving new weird problems. Like, you got this new weird thing. You're not even sure if it's important. You got to decide if you should tackle it and what to do. Second, making decisions that align with your ethics, your morals, what you want out of the world. And third, imagining a new future of events that doesn't exist yet. Solving and deciding and imagining, that's your job going forward. It's not processing and sitting in meetings all day. It's solving problems, making decisions, and imagining a new, better world of events.
Fantastic. I don't think we could end on a higher note. Gentlemen, thank you so much for bringing your wisdom, genius, and excellence to this chat. I don't think any of us could have thought the wealth of knowledge that we would get in an hour would have happened. I want to thank you for also making what something could be very complex, very practical, useful, and super easy to understand. I think making it so digestible possible for us, taking away a little bit of the fear, helping us shift our mindsets to what's possible. And Dan, as you said, looking at a new future for what the possible could be, imagining the possible, and knowing that these tools can help us imagine the possible, augment the stuff that we do on repeat every day so that we have more space to be imaginative and look at those futures. I think it's such a hopeful conversation instead of a sort of stressful one more thing conversation. So I really love that you left us with that. I want to thank you for joining us today. So Bruce, we're so sorry we missed you, but we hope you all found this fantastic webinar by Eventcombo valuable. The replay will be shared after the event, and we invite you to continue the conversation by following Eventcombo on LinkedIn and YouTube. Of course, please connect with our fantastic panelists to continue the conversation. And please feel free to connect with me, Devon Montgomery Pasha at DMP Creative, as we continue to lead powerful conversations like this. We wish you all a fantastic rest of your day, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.